It's time and we have a quorum. I now call the meeting to order. Since the last meeting, 2 information papers were issued. Details are listed on the agenda. Barring any comments, we can enter the next agenda item. Items to be discussed at the meeting on the 23rd of January 2018. The next regular meeting will be held on 23rd of January, which is a Tuesday, from 2:30 to 5:30 p.m. The administration suggests discussion of the following items. 1. Implementation of Water Intelligence Network. The administration indicated that this item will cover the replacement of aging pipes. Number 2, water supply to new housing developments in Shangshui and Fanling. Number 3, Silhowan water treatment works extension. And 4, relocation of Diamond Hill freshwater and saltwater service reservoirs to caverns. Ms. Tanya Chen, thank you. I have no comments on the items to be discussed at the next meeting. When you look at the list of outstanding items, and Mrs. Regina Yip is also concerned about trees management. On trees management, can we cover this issue with the relevant departments? Hopefully the chairman can work with the vice chairman so that we can discuss this in the first quarter next year. We will reflect that to the administration. I think this should be discussed ahead of the windy season. Let's enter the next item. We now invite the administration in. If you have questions, please press the request to speak button. You can press the button from your seats.
Okay, 咁去到邊度？呢度去到。跟住就呢度啦，咁請佢介紹下先。今日出席官員呢，就係由羅鑑華先生，就係發展局嘅副秘書長，係規劃及地政嘅，同埋施金長先生，就係發展局首席助理秘書長，就係規劃及地政嘅，同埋彭亞妮女士係土木工程拓展處南拓展處嘅處長，同埋李偉文先生呢，就係土木工程拓展處嘅總工程師。
Would the administration walk us through the paper or presentation? Thank you very much. When we planned the Kwun Tong Town Center redevelopment, some residents indicated that they want to see pedestrian linkages being introduced in order to enhance connectivity between the town center and surrounding areas. In 2009, we announced the construction of 2 pedestrian linkages, and we also organized a design competition with the theme of connecting Kwun Tong, and we invited ideas. The Yudhwa Street pedestrian linkage was completed in 2016 or 2015, and it has proved to be popular among residents. And we would like to introduce the second pedestrian linkage today. And this would span the Hip Wall Street near the junction of Hip Wall Street and Mudwa Street. Apart from providing a round-the-clock pedestrian linkage for Kwun Tong residents, the linkage can allow existing Kwun Tong residents to enjoy a safe and comfortable linkage to the Kwun Tong Community Health Center building. And the building is already in operation, and according to figures from the hospital authority, this health center can provide outpatient services to 230 residents per year. So we can provide a comfortable and barrier-free access for residents, and that's why the project is worth supporting. I will now hand over to CDD to talk to us about the design and costs of the footbridge. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. I will walk you through the project with a PowerPoint presentation. In order to enhance accessibility or connectivity of Kwun Tong Town Center with its neighborhood, we would have a pedestrian linkage system, which is grade separated. For phase 1, we have the Yue Hua Street pedestrian linkage system, and it was completed in October 2015 and is open for use. For the current item 163TB and the part to be upgraded to Category A, there is a footbridge across Hip Wall Street near the junction of Hip Wall Street and Matwa Street. In other words, the area denoted in red. We want to enhance connectivity of Kwun Tong Town Center and improve circulation of pedestrian flow in the area. We also want to benefit the community of a wider district, especially the elderly, the disabled, and users of the Kwun Tong Community Health Center building. We can see the area of the works here. The area in orange is a curved footbridge. The length is 39 meters with a width of 4 to 6 meters. There would also be a branch with a lift and or arm. There would be another arm that is 13 meters long. We would also include the construction of footpaths, drainage and utilities works, landscaping works, and related E&M works. When the footbridge is completed, this is a view from Hip Wall Street towards the south. This is another artist's impression of the footbridge. The design is minimalistic, and we want to allow residents to enjoy greater connectivity, and they can travel to the Kwun Tong Community Health Center from the Kwun Tong Town Center, and this would be connected to a 24-hour pedestrian linkage which leads to Yue Hua Street. We have consulted the Kwun Tong District Council on this item, and the Kwun Tong DC endorsed the project. We also gazetted an authorization notice of the proposed works under the Roads, Works, Use and Compensation Ordinance, and the authorization notice was gazetted on the 9th of June. We also consulted the advisory committee on the appearance of bridges and associated structures, and they endorsed the design. For the part under item 163TB, which is to be upgraded to Category A, apart from a lift and staircase, It would include ancillary works, including widening of roads, beautification works, as well as mitigation measures, and this also covers consultants' fees and the remuneration of resident site staff and contingencies.
We estimate that we will need $153.5 million. We hope to submit this proposal to PWSC, and we hope that in the first quarter 2018 we will get funding approval from FC, and in Q2 of 2018 we can commence works. So I hope members will endorse our proposal to upgrade 163TB to Cat A. Because this involves funding proposal, I would like to remind members that according to Rule 83A, if members have direct or indirect pecuniary interest, please declare the nature of the interest before you make comments. Because of time constraints, I will allow 3 minutes to each member for both the question and the answer. Ms. Tanya Chan, what is the average cost of this bridge on a per square meter basis? Thank you, Chairman. On average, it's 400,000 per square meter. Chairman, well, the chairman of the WKCD subcommittee is here. Well, we had scrutinized in the past some footbridge which was highly costly. So is it true that this average cost of 400,000 per square meter is not really very high? Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Ms. Chen, for the question. We have taken into consideration some site investigation information. This footbridge is a simple, commonplace footbridge, and I think the cost is that of a usual footbridge. 10 years ago in Chunwan, it took 170,000 to build 1 meter, and now we're talking about 2 million in total. Of course, the bridge may be of different width and length, but then I think the cost of footbridge is getting higher and higher. Just now, you mentioned the Kwun Tong Community Center, which is serving the public already. On the ground floor, there's some space. URA has built a rather expensive Kwun Yue Hua Feng, and there's 30-meter connection to it. So is it true that within the construction site there is a community facility, then the government will pay the bill of building a footbridge? How do you define the demand? Permanent Secretary. Thank you, Chairman and Ms. Chan. Let me explain the purpose of this footbridge. As stated in Annex 1, the orange part is the road section. We're seeking funding approval. For the connection, it is along Matwa Street. It is in the older district. Even though we're talking about Park Metropolitan by URA, however, in the building right now, there's already a large-scale Kwun Tong Community Health Center. Let me explain the use of this health center. Originally, every day, the hospital authority has to offer daytime general outpatient service to residents. There is dental service and maternal and child care service and so on. I can offer you some data. Every day up till now, the number of residents going to this health center exceeds 5,000, and half of them are elders and needy people. So now, if you want to go to this health center on the ground surface is not convenient because the traffic is very busy. Every day there are many vehicles and pedestrians going across the area. So if we can offer a footbridge which is convenient, comfortable, and barrier-free, linking to the health center, it is good. Chairman, I understand this is good for the elders, but the main entrance is opposite the road. I don't know whether this footbridge will serve the residents or the luxurious flat owners. Then, Ms. Tanya Chen, will you support? We won't object. Mr. Lau Kwok Fan, well, I am also a member of the WKCD subcommittee. There's a 69-meter 7 by 7-meter footbridge of the cost of 350 million, but then the subcommittee voted down on that footbridge because the cost was too high. Now this time we're talking about 150 million, and it's shorter by the WKCD footbridge by half. It's 39 meter long by 6 meter width. So I want to know what are the reasons that this footbridge is so expensive. In the WKCD, well, perhaps because it is an art square bridge, so the design is very special. But for this, being a very ordinary footbridge, is it because there are some technical difficulties? Today is good because Ms. Pang was responsible for the WKCD footbridge and also this one, so you can offer a clear explanation. Thank you, Chairman. Thank you for the question. As explained, there are foundation works as well as the footbridge surface works, and then the site investigation results will decide on the depth of the foundation and whether piling is required. For the foundation, 43 piles, 15 meter deep each, are involved. And we are talking about a very busy road section, so this adds to the difficulty of the work. Now, this footbridge is an ordinary, usual one. Materials to be used are just usual materials. 39 meters is the length of the main footbridge. It doesn't include the staircase and the ancillary bridges. Because of the location, the elevator has to be placed on the arm, and we want a better connection. There's a design contest, and there are many requests that this footbridge should be connected to the pedestrian footbridge of the URA, built by the URA. So, in other words, the length is not only 39 meters. There are 2 arms which have to be built. So these factors affect the cost. And on the road service, some work will have to be done. Mr. Wilson Orr, Chairman, the cost of this footbridge is really alarming. And we were shocked when we learned this from the media. Now, the actual demand for this footbridge is big. The condition of that road surface is bad. There is traffic black spots and there are many elders. But then the cost is 150 odd million. This is really alarming. Can we be given a breakdown of this cost? Otherwise, it will be difficult to convince the public. Besides, for this footbridge, why is it that you do not consider asking the URA or the future developer to share the cost given K7 development? In the future, if you share the cost, then perhaps the cost of this footbridge can be lowered. If you haven't considered, why not? Have you asked the URA or whoever the developer is to share the cost of this footbridge? Just this short question first. Thank you, Chairman. Thank you for the question. As shown on this slide, you can see the breakdown. Apart from the footbridge, there are ancillary works and also environment mitigation measures, which entail cost. And then there's the need to relocate some pipes and sewage drains. And for the road surface, some changes are necessary. Some electrical and mechanical works are also required because there is some cameras that need to be relocated. So 80 million is the cost of these ancillary works. Let me interrupt you. So that means there is no way to lower this cost. Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Member. During construction period, we will try our best to control cost. Chairman, because of time, I am also a Kwun Tong District Councillor. Now, there will be two arms around Kin Tak building. One is a staircase, the other is an elevator. But then these two arms can share the surface of the footbridge. Then this can help lower cost. Have you taken this into consideration? Yes, thank you. We have considered this. We do hope to save unnecessary expenses, but the pedestrian pavement surface is narrow. So if you refer to this yellow part, in fact, the road surface needs to be widened so that there will be better pedestrian flow. Dr. Lo Wai Kwok. Thank you, Chairman. Chairman, many years ago, for a long period of time, I lived in Ngau Tau Kok and Kwun Tong. So I am very familiar with this road section. Of course, there is redevelopment plan, but for Yuwa Street, Matwa Street, and so on, the road condition all along has been unsatisfactory. In the past, traffic was not that busy, so it's still okay. When traffic became when traffic became busier, and there is competition of road space between vehicles and pedestrians, then it's very undesirable. So I strongly support the building of this footbridge. It will connect different places. Some people said that private residential developments may benefit from it. Chairman, I think this kind of support facility serves the public, and you don't want to differentiate whether residents are living in public housing or private housing. So I think it is good to have private-public partnership so that the whole thing can be done in a proper way. But then I'm worried about traffic impact during construction, because there will definitely be some time that the road surface will be affected by various structures. Now, is there any good construction plan so that there won't be serious traffic impact and also impact on pedestrians? Permanent Secretary. Let me answer the question and also the second question of Mr. Oh. If you refer to Annex 1, well, you will know more about our division of labor. Now, for this pedestrian linkage system, it is not only about this orange part. It also includes the part enclosed by the dotted lines. And it connects two different development areas of URA. According to our plan, URA will pay the bill to build it. At the beginning, I explained already that for the orange part, it will convenience members of the general public and residents in the Kwun Tong Old District, and also people using the health center in the first development area. So we believe that it is appropriate for the government to pay for this part. So do you support? Yes. Mr. Leung Chi-chang?
Chairman, I think a pedestrian linkage system is worth supporting. And part of the area is government space, would connect to government property, so it's especially worth supporting. Members asked about the issue of costs before. The cost is some cause for concern because we have seen budget overruns for multiple projects, and the overruns have been substantial. Apparently, this is not a very long footbridge. It is only about 40 meters long, and part of it is only 4 meters wide, and the cost is $150 million. Perhaps the government has conducted investigation underneath, and there might be some complications. So would you consider building this footbridge elsewhere? That way you can save some money. So would there be other options? And the housing society will build another connecting bridge. That's why you chose this site. So this might be a constraint. Without such constraint, you might be able to enjoy more convenience or save some money. So would this be one option? I don't think many people would use a staircase, and most people would prefer to use the lift. But since disabled persons also need to use the lift, if you do not build escalators for a footbridge, it will probably not be very popular, and some people have to take the lifts, so the capacity for the lift might be strained. But if you build an escalator, it might ease the problem. So would you consider replacing one staircase with an escalator? Of course, that would increase the costs, but I think your design is rather outdated and it cannot satisfy people's needs. Thank you very much. Our lifts have substantial capacity. They can fit 12 people and 900 kilograms. If there are 2 wheelchair users, there won't be space for anyone else. It takes about 10 seconds to go up or down, and no more than 2 minutes including entering and leaving. If we are to have an escalator, well, a staircase would be necessary anyway, and if we need another escalator, we would need space, and we need higher pedestrian flow to justify such need. Why is a staircase necessary? Leung Chi-chang, does the DAB support the idea? Personally, I do not support the idea. I have to ask our spokesperson, Mr. Jonathan Ho. This footbridge is connected to another footbridge built by the URA. So by the 4th quarter this year, the URA has already completed the linkage system, and this footbridge would connect to the wet market. Once it's finished, residents from Yuen Wah Street can easily reach the market. You are asking for funds today, and based on the current progress at the PWSC, you might have to wait for a long time. And if you need the FC's approval as well, I don't know how long we have to wait. For the part by URA, it will be completed by Q4 this year. I realize that you might want to secure funds in one go next year, but in case of delays, then why don't you consider working on it earlier? In terms of the interfacing, the government is always lagging behind. When the government wants to build a park in a public housing estate, we often have to wait a very long time. So the mechanism for securing funds is way too slow. Thank you very much. As we said, this is a very busy road, and we worked closely with the URA on the progress of construction. Once the design is confirmed, if we can work on this juncture concurrently, there could be congestion. So shouldn't you secure the funds ahead of time and begin construction ASAP? When the other footbridge is finished, they would have to wait for us to complete. Thank you very much. Based on our schedule, once funds are secured, we will begin the works by Q2 next year, and by 2020 the works would be completed. And we can then dovetail with the needs of the district. As for the at-grade pedestrian crossing, you just mentioned 2020, right? The Kwun Tong redevelopment phases 2 and 3 would have been completed. So do we have to wait for another 2 years? Would the FTU support the idea? Of course, we would be supportive, but the government must explain the details. Mr. Chen Chi-chun, thank you. Since I'm attending 3 meetings concurrently, if this has already been answered, please let me know. The length is 39 meters. The cost is $153 million. Part of it belongs to the government and part of it to the URA. So if the project does not involve URA, would this footbridge be unnecessary? Can the government tell us how they draw the line? Why didn't they ask the URA to construct this bridge? What about the arrangements for recurrent expenditure and maintenance? After the footbridge is completed, would the pedestrian crossing at Yuhua Street be abolished? So apart from the Yuhua Street residents who would actually use this footbridge. And I see that there is a lift, and it is the most expensive component in terms of maintenance. I'm not sure if the part built by URA includes a lift. If not, the lift built by the government might have to serve the other part as well. So would the government fully absorb the costs for the lift? As for the Yuhua Street bridge, the cost is $90 million, whereas for this bridge the cost is $150 million. Can you explain the difference? I'd like to explain the design of the system and the divisional work with the URA, as enclosure 1 suggests. The dotted line connects to stages 1, 2, 3 of the URA project. It connects to URA projects, so that part would be paid for by the URA. But another part of the footbridge, in other words, the orange part, as I have explained, it mainly serves residents in the older areas of Kwun Tong. They can reach the government facilities in phase 1 of the development area via the footbridge. And there is a community health center building, and there are 5,000 users per day. That's why there's a need for a comfortable and barrier-free access for residents to reach the building. As for other issues, I would delegate to other colleagues. Mr. Ray Chen, does People Power endorse the project? We have not decided yet. Mr. Wu Chi-wai, thank you. When the item is discussed at the Public Works Subcommittee, I hope you can provide a comparison of the per meter construction costs. At Matwa Street, the 2 locations you identified are extremely congested. So I think you must extend the pedestrian crossing, and you should reserve more space at the island. After these footbridges are completed, the pedestrian crossing would be demolished. Is this correct? Would the crossing be demolished, and would the island be rendered useless? Thank you very much. We considered the width of the pedestrian crossing and whether it's adequate. The current width is 3 meters. We want to use some of that space in order to widen the pedestrian path. We also want to maintain the road. Would you allocate more space or allocate some space off the island? After a staircase is built, how much width would remain? This is a very congested road, and if you seal off the pedestrian crossing between Yuhua Street, Tipua Street, and Matwa Street, would you convert a staircase into an escalator, much like Mong Kok? You should build a one-way escalator to allow people to reach Kwun Tong MTR easily. Would you do that? Thank you very much. As we carried out district consultation, we have been saying that the pedestrian crossing would be retained. So there would be 2 options by that time. There would be pedestrian crossing and a footbridge, right? If this is the case, to me, this is a disappointing idea. The function of the footbridge is to segregate pedestrians and cars, but now you're telling us that there would still be pedestrian crossing at grade. So is this why you opt for a staircase instead of escalator? Mr. Wu, does the Democratic Party support the idea? They must reconsider their plan. I feel that the idea is not feasible. Mr. Jeremy Tam, like what other members have said, the part connecting to Park Metropolitan should not be paid by the government. It should be paid for by the URA. Even though there are community facilities underneath, how many users would there be? Many of them would use the at-grade crossing. So did you come up with any percentages in order to apportion part of the costs for the part leading to Park Metropolitan? Deputy Secretary, as I said, when residents visit the general outpatient clinic at the community health center building as well as the dental clinic, the daily average number of users is 5,000. So some of them would use the at-grade crossing, some use the footbridge. Figures show that half the users are elderly people and the less mobile people, but we see that the population in the Kwun Tong old areas are aging. So how many people would visit Park Metropolitan via the footbridge?
We do not have this figure yet. Then this is the problem. If you say half, then that means 2,500 people. Then, okay, you may say that there are 3,000 people from Park Metropolitan. Then you can work out the cost-sharing ratio. It is not reasonable for the government to pay everything. Now, for this footbridge, we think that the main users are residents of Kwun Tong. But just now you said you have no information about the number of users in Park Metropolitan. Then everything is based on speculation. Just now, colleague talked about Escalator. And now, if you look at B here, I think there should be Escalator. Not all elders are wheelchair bound. Okay, we will go back to consider this point about Escalator. Chairman, okay, can you now promise us to calculate the number of people from Park Metropolitan who will use this footbridge? Can this be done? We'll check whether we have the statistics with us. Perhaps you can give us the information after the meeting. Next, Dr. K.K. Kwok, 3 minutes. Chairman, I think the government is really very generous. The cost here is more than 100 million. Now, we're talking about a private residential development, Park Metropolitan, involved here. Now, it seems that there is a very harmonious relationship between the government and the business because the government has introduced the GFS. Okay, you do not have any data about Park Metropolitan, but now you are discussing this with us. Shouldn't you carry out some feasibility study in relation to Park Metropolitan? Permanent Secretary or Deputy Secretary, we will gather the information and produce the information after the meeting. Okay, you come here for funding approval, but you do not even give us the basic information. Are you treating us like an ATM? I think this is really outrageous. We are not talking about a small amount. It's more than 100 million of public funds. The footbridge will be connected to a private residential development. FC will be dominated by the pro-establishment camp, but you should also face up to other LegCo members. You should at least present some basic data. Why don't you have data, Deputy Secretary? For this type of works, we have data on people flow. Okay, then my second question is, based on the need, then you can work out cost sharing. Usually, the data won't show very clearly where the pedestrians are from. This footbridge will be connected to a private residential development, and they don't need to pay anything. Let me explain clearly. Based on the existing design, if pedestrians walk up from Mutwa Street, then they are residents of that district. But for the other direction, from Yutwa Street and Area 1 of URA, those pedestrians may not necessarily be residents in Park Metropolitan, because in Park Metropolitan there is a 24-hour access, enabling people from US Street to go through, and they can go down the hill by means of this 24-hour access. So it's difficult to differentiate whether residents along this direction are living in Park Metropolitan or not, or are they from Yua Street or above. But you haven't answered my question. Should this private residential development pay part of the construction cost? Thank you, Chairman. I explained very clearly that for this footbridge, we think that the main use is to connect the older Kwun Tong district and the health center and other facilities, so that there will be a comfortable and barrier-free access. And we think that it is an appropriate public works program. Okay, we have overrun by 15 minutes for this item, so I cannot allow Mr. Orr to speak for the second round. Otherwise, if everybody is going to speak for the second round, then we won't be able to discuss the Hon CHU Hoi-dick item. Before this item is concluded, I want to say on behalf of the Liberal Party that we support the tabling of this proposal to PWSC. Okay, next agenda item. Operation Building Bright 2.1, LC paper number CB1343171804. 04 is from the administration. 05 is background brief prepared by Electrical Secretariat. So let's invite the administration to come in. For this item, we have the Secretary, Mr. Wang, and also Deputy Secretary, Mr. Wai Chi Shing from URA, Mr. Chang Kin Chang, Director of Buildings, and Mr. Chu, Ms. Choi Sut-yong from Development Bureau, and Mr. Hon CHU Hoi-dick from URA. Members, please press the button if you would like to speak. Secretary, are you going to make a briefing? Chairman, we have a PPT presentation. I'll defer to the Deputy Secretary. Yes, thank you, Chairman. Okay. The objectives of Operation Building Bright 2.0 are very clear and focused. We'd like to offer technical and financial support to building owners so that all the potential safety hazards can be eliminated to safeguard public safety. Based on the objectives I said just now, there are three main principles in this plan. First, it is risk-based. Residential commercial buildings over 50 years of age, number 5,000. And for those older buildings, they have higher chance of causing building safety problems. So this time, we will target at residential and commercial buildings with more than 50 years of age. For buildings with lower rateable value, in terms of their finance and organizational ability, it will be more difficult for them to take on repair works. And so they are in a worse condition. So this time we want to put in an upper limit in terms of rateable value. It is going to be similar with other similar schemes. The next principle is that this project is going to be objective-based. All the buildings taking part in this scheme will have to go according to the statutory procedure of the mandatory building inspection scheme. So authorized people should be appointed to do inspection. Repair works have to be completed according to this scheme in order to be eligible. And number 3, the project should be caring. We want to make sure that public money is well spent, so we hope to help those needy property owners. So we will mainly help the self-occupiers of qualified buildings. For developers which are doing M&A or investors using the unit to get rental income, they will not be covered by this scheme. At the same time, we will increase the amount of financial assistance significantly comparing with the 2009 scheme. So the upper limit will be increased from 16,000 to 40,000. And we will subsidize 80% of the cost of the repair works. And for elderly owners, we will increase the amount of financial assistance to 50,000. Now, we want to emphasize a point. Building repair is the responsibility of property owners, and we will encourage the eligible property owners to prepare for the necessary repair and inspection works, and they can make application. If there is surplus subsidy, it can be used in relevant building repair works. There are some buildings with 3 nodes or 3 knots. They may not be able to organize repair works. Then, according to our statutory power, the buildings department will carry out the works for these buildings, but we will charge the property owners. Buildings that are qualified will still be entitled to the subsidy. In the past, there were similar schemes which might lead to more bid rigging among contractors. So in para 27 and 28, we set out some detailed measures. Now, this time, all the buildings in Operations Building Bright 2.0 must take part in the URA's tendering in order to recruit contractor. And then we will also look into the possibility of an electronic tendering platform so that it will also cover consultancy service, so that the consultant and the contractor's recruitment will be free from disturbance or intervention. Besides, we will ask all buildings to take part in a scheme of the police. That is, the police will send out officers to visit buildings participating in this operation, and relevant information will be disseminated to them. When necessary, the police will send officers to sit in owners' committee meetings so as to make sure that the bad guys won't have the opportunity. Finally, at the end of next year, when this operation is implemented, there will be a building maintenance platform. It is going to be a one-stop platform offering information to property owners so that they can make informed decision. Finally, for this scheme, the URA will be responsible to manage it. And we have taken reference from past similar schemes. We hope that our work is going to be progressive and orderly so that there won't be too many repair works carried out at the same time, pushing up the cost. So in the coming 5 years, every year there will be 500 buildings taking part in the scheme. So altogether, 2,500 buildings. Total cost will be 3 billion. So in mid next year, we will accept the first round of applications.
The first round of applications focus on owners who have received MBIS notices, and about 1,500 buildings would satisfy the requirements. And early next year, we plan to promote to these target buildings so that they can make arrangements ahead of time so that the works can begin in earnest. For the 3 new buildings, through the housing or building department, we will carry out default works, and these would begin starting mid-2018. So that's all for the presentation. This item involves a funding suggestion. I remind members that based on Rule 83 of the Rules of Procedure, if members have would like to speak on items of direct or indirect pecuniary interest, please disclose the nature of such interest before you speak. So members have pressed the button. There are 10. Mr. Ronnie Chan, Lau Kok Fong, Alice Mac, Chan Pan, Kwok Ka Ki, Ko Wai Kang, Jeremy Tam, Ho Kai Ming, Cheng Chung Tai, Lam Shuk Teng, 3 minutes each. Ronnie Chan, thank you. I'm concerned about the anti-bid rigging initiatives. In Annex B, it lists out the measures against bid rigging. So for the consultants and contractors, would there be any vetting of their backgrounds? For example, the experience of their directors, whether they have received complaints, and there would be registered contractors and authorized persons for each work. And would there be any minimum and maximum requirements on the number of these persons? So would there be any requirements on the numbers of such persons? And in paragraph 5, it says the URA and HA would hire an independent third party to monitor the works before dispersing the funds. So are these individuals on a separate list from the list of registered contractors? In paragraph 6, there have been 25 irregular cases and 44 contraventions, and would the contravening contractors be put on a blacklist? I would like to invite the URA to answer. Mr. Y, I'd like to invite my colleague Daniel Ho to explain the operation. Thank you. First of all, the descriptions in Annex 6, they refer to OB 1.0, and they are not relevant to OB 2.0. As for the hiring of consultants and contractors, if owners do not know how to hire consultants and contractors, we would offer support, and if tender documents are needed, we would tell them how to draft them. As for the background and history of complaints, the tender documents would specify such requirements. The owners can vet whether a consultant or contractor is appropriate. As for the number of consultants and contractors required, it is up to the owner. According to the Building Management Ordinance Cap 344, an open tender is needed. The number of bidders could not be controlled unless the owner conducts pre-qualification. We have no such lists on hand. You said you have no such list on hand. Does it mean that there is such a list? We have no such list on hand. We have no such list. For authorized persons, there's a list by the buildings department, so they can use that list. I cannot allow you to follow up on this. But I think what you asked and what he answered are two separate things. Would you support the submission of this item to the Public Works Subcommittee? I think I would decide after I hear what other members say. All right, Mr. Edward Lau. Thank you. I'm not sure if the Secretary has read The Romance of Three Kingdoms. And one of the part of the story described a general who executed a poor strategy. The OBB should have been a good idea for the owners of three new buildings, and you have invested resources, and the elderly and tenants should have been happy, but eventually they suffered bid rigging, and they had to pay for the money themselves at the end. So in the past or past bid rigging cases, you did not put much attention, and the money only benefited the engineering firms, and they would benefit from your subsidies, and the elderly had to pay out of their own pockets. So we have received a lot of cases in which people had to pay tens or even hundreds of thousands of dollars out of their own pockets. So under OBB 2.0, is there any specific measure against bid rigging? A lot of contractors issue quotations based on the amount of funding you provide. You have OBB 1.0 and now 2.0, and you are grouping the projects within a short period. If the operation has proved to be popular, are you going to make it regular so that the projects can be spread out more evenly? That way you won't have to carry out 1,500 projects within 1 or 2 years, and the contractors would stand to profit or exploit. So under OBB 2.0, have you made any of these specific measures? Thank you very much. On bid rigging, the government understands the concerns. When OBB 2.0 is promoted, there must be measures against bid rigging. I think the URA Smart Tender project and the rehabilitation program can minimize the risk of bid rigging. Of course, we cannot completely eliminate bid rigging. So as I've said before, stakeholders must remain vigilant. We are not bunching our resources within a short time. And 250 buildings would be worked on by the BD on behalf or in default of owners. When you look at OBB 1.0, there have been multiple injections. The first time, $70 million, and subsequently $320 million by 2020, we will review the situation, and we remain open to different options. As for details of the smart tender scheme, I wonder if we have enough time. I don't intend to interrupt, but we do have a number of items remaining today. So you spend almost 15 minutes in the presentation. It's very hard for us to get our hands on these issues. Mr. Edward Lau, do you agree with the submission of this project to the PWSC? On principle, we support it, but we would like to hear more. Ms. Asmak, I declare that I'm a non-executive director of the Urban Renewal Authority, and I support this scheme. To tackle the problem of building aging in Hong Kong, the efforts of URA alone is not enough. We must ensure the quality of aging buildings. Mr. Edward Lau said we should regularize the program. I think the Development Bureau should regularize such work. That way we can maintain the quality of aging buildings, and that they would not necessarily have to be rebuilt. So regularization is very important. Some people say that there's a lot of bid rigging involved, but even without such funding, the owners would still receive MBIS notices, and they still have to carry out works, and there would still be bid rigging. So would this operation encourage bid rigging? I am not very sure. I hope the URA would explain how we can protect owners from bid rigging. The government explained the OBB 2.0, but apart from providing funding, there would be professional advice and support. So the chances of bid rigging should be minimal. So apart from funding, what kind of professional support are you offering? Since the URA has to provide a lot of professional support, would the government offer greater manpower support for the URA? So the URA has to support the owners. So in terms of manpower and administrative costs, would there be more or further commitment from the government? As for regularization of the operation and manpower support, we have heard your views, and in our coming review, we would review all the options. Can you talk about manpower support at this stage? On the government is not providing any administrative funding to the URA. As for manpower support, we would look at it in the next review. Any follow-up question? Thank you very much. In paragraphs 27 and 8, we explain how the risk of bid rigging can be minimized. And in paragraph 28, we talked about the building rehabilitation platform. We are now setting up this platform, which has three purposes. It provides a one-stop database, and there will be practice guidelines and guidance to cover the entire workflow of building rehabilitation. For example, commissioning of contractors, inspection, potential contract disputes, etc. And in this database, we will provide information on bid rigging or the costs of building rehabilitation or maintenance. So hopefully these would help owners. There is now bid rigging because there are no market patterns, and different contractors and consultants use their own contractual standards or planning standards. So another purpose of the platform is to align the market. We would have a list of contractual terms and provisions, and we will have regulation related information, and this would facilitate regulation. Currently, regulation is a challenge. Finally, we want to create a list of quality service providers with our partners or the trade, and with this list, owners can can better secure our service providers. Thank you.
Next, Mr. Chen Han Pen. Thank you, Chairman. Time is limited. This is very broad, so I cannot ask a lot of questions. But this is a good proposal because in the past, many old buildings face difficulties when they needed repair. But even though there's a good scheme, there's the need for good monitoring and regulation. We still haven't seen a good way to guard against bid rigging. For smart tender, I do not have too much confidence in it. I hope URA can convince me so that I will have confidence. Now, consultancy companies collaborate with repair companies. With the consultancy companies, they can then take part. Otherwise, they don't even dare to put in a bid. Now, there's a consultant, and below it there are 10 repair companies. Other people dare not put in a bid. So I hope that the monitoring departments can use different ways to monitor the situation. For example, when you recruit repair company, please also recruit the consultant company as well. So I hope there is the opportunity for us to discuss with URA. If there is a good way, then it will be more appropriate to give funding approval. But now we haven't seen that solution yet. Mr. Wai Chi-shing said that there is a platform. We would like to know what that platform is. Today, there are representatives from the buildings department. What is the role of the buildings department after repair? If people tell you that works are completed, will the buildings department do inspection of the quality? You have asked 3 questions. You are not allowing time for them to answer. But anyway, I won't have the chance to get their answers because you won't allow the second round, and I've got only 4 minutes. I have reservations about submitting this proposal to PWSC. I want them to explain how they're going to guard against bid rigging, and I want an explanation on the role of the buildings department. Buildings department, can you tell me how many buildings were checked on a sampling basis? Okay. Can you give answers in writing later to Mr. Chen? Director, thank you, Chairman. After mandatory building inspection notice is issued, and then the property owners will commission authorized people to do investigation, and then there will be a repair proposal, and then contractor will be employed, and then the work will be supervised. After the works are carried out, there will be a certificate. Buildings department will sample 15% of the works to do an inspection to see whether the contractor and the authorized persons have discharged their duties and whether the works are up to standard according to buildings department standards. If there is problem, we will prosecute or we will take disciplinary measures. Next, Dr. K.K. Kwok. We hope to support this proposal, but there are 2 major problems. Regarding bid rigging, even with the URA measure, the problem can't be solved the platform is rather passive. Today, ICAC published some latest figures. 2/3 of the convicted private companies are working on property management and buildings repair. Now, the consultants and the contractors collude. I think this is known in the industry. The consultants charge a very low price, and then the contractor will then take a bigger profit. Can independent consultants be appointed by, for example, URA? That would be better, because the consultants may be NGOs. In the past, the Institute of Surveyors and Institute of Architects had some schemes to help low-income earners and elders to do the work. But if that part of the work, that is consultancy, can be made permanent or regular, then there will be a partitioning between contractors and consultants. Otherwise, the consultants will charge a very low fee, and then they will collude to take a bigger profit from the whole contract. Secretary, thank you, Dr. Kwok, for the question and your support. You cannot say that all consultants and contractors are problematic. I think I need to make clear this point. Decisions rest with OCs. In the existing scheme, yes, there is independent consultant involved. May I defer to Mr. Y? Yes, thank you, Chairman. Let me give more information about the platform. There are 3 purposes of the platform, and one of the tools is Smart Tender, and it is now used to recruit contractors. And we will discuss with the industry to use Smart Tender to appoint other consultants. And in the future, if independent monitoring is needed, then independent consultant can also be appointed by Smart Tender. And then we'll see how much help we can offer. Then can there be better partitioning? The government can employ independent consultants. Mr. Y? We have communicated with the industry. When this platform was established, well, there are 3 committees comprising representatives of the industry. Messages from the industry are that for consultant companies and contractors, they do want to help property owners to do the repair. But as such as now, there is no regulation in the industry. Everybody uses his own way. The consultants and contractors have their own tender documents. It's easy for them to collude. But then if there is a template, that is, if they want to take part in building repair, then the consultants and the contractors will have to use the standard templates. Then in this way, the rule-abiding contractors and consultants can take part in this whole work. Will the Civic Party support this proposal? We'll wait and see. All right, Mr. Kwok Wai-kang, concerning rateable value, well, it is a line to be drawn. How is this line drawn? Can it be on a higher level? For buildings more than 50 years of age, if you sell the properties, well, they won't worth a lot. So can this value be, can this line be drawn in a more relaxed way? And is it true that the units must be for self-occupation in order to get the financial assistance? What about those rented out units? The older the buildings are, the more difficult it is for them to meet all the laws. Because, for example, fire safety ordinance is often updated, and so the cost and expenses of repair will be higher. So for OBB 2.0, the financial assistance for elders will be increased from 40,000 to 50,000. We will support this. In fact, this scheme targets at buildings on which notices have been issued. But then, can there be a triage so that those more dangerous buildings will be worked on first? Even if there is no bid rigging, if all of a sudden this scheme is introduced, wages and material costs will be pushed up. So if the work is in an orderly, progressive manner and in batches, then there will be a balance between the market and property owners' affordability. Secretary, thank you, Chairman. We think the upper limit is necessary because the purpose is to help those who are most in need. How are the figures set? 162,000 and 148,000. Well, 80% of the buildings more than 50 years old are covered. Now, if a property owner needs to stay in elderly home and if the unit is vacated, then we'll exercise discretion. If a person lives in another place, he rents out the apartment, then he may not be the person most in need. Every year, especially for the first few years, usually 250 blocks can be worked on. And it may not be meaningful to draw this line in a more lenient way. Any follow-up? No, time is up. Next, Mr. Jeremy Tam. Concerning subsidizing the needy people, elders will be assisted. Page 3 of your paper, D. Let's say if a person is already very old, he has transferred his property to his son or daughter, but he himself still lives there. So can he benefit? Secretary? Well, our approach is if the elder offers his apartment for his family members to live in, but then the title still belongs to the elder, he can still benefit. But if the title is owned by a younger person, now, if the building age and the rateable value are eligible, but you may be asking about whether the assistance will be 40,000 or 50,000. If the property owner has not reached the age limit, then he should be getting 40,000. Then this is different from the original intent. Now, some elders will transfer their properties to their children, but then the elder himself still lives in that particular unit. Okay. When it comes to a higher assistance amount, for example, that is 50,000, it is for elderly owner-occupier. So if the occupier is not an elderly, well, he can still benefit, but he won't be getting 50,000. So in other words, well, if the property owner is the son or daughter, he or she should be able to afford the repair cost. Well, many elders may not be aware of this. Okay, I have a point about bid rigging. Well, under OBB 2.0, for the ICU, does it have a role? Some time ago, I said to the director that there's the need for a bigger involvement from them because these are very old buildings. Property owners are not aware of a lot of things. They need help from the government. So will this ICU play a bigger role? Do they have a role really? Secretary, Mr. Tam, now for ICU, I can't really follow your points. The ICU will check whether the building is in line with renovation. I guess you are referring to the buildings department, because this plan is based on the MBIS. So when the building is in this scheme, then some repairs will be proposed within the scope of MBIS. Then URA will also help out.
Mr. Y, thank you. According to the MBIS notice, the buildings department would require a registered inspector to carry out the inspections and make recommendations on the works to be carried out. Mr. Jonathan Ho, thank you. I have two questions. First, under what circumstances would the buildings department intervene and carry out the works? For 3 new buildings, no one is willing to chip in with a share of the cost, so they would ignore the notice, and at the end the deadlines would have lapsed. So under what circumstances would the buildings department carry out default works? Can the 3 new building owners just ask the BD to carry out the works? Next year, the Security Bureau would allocate funding on fire safety works. Would the BD present the whole package so that owners can apply? If you move earlier than the Security Bureau, it would be very hard for owners to gather the or share the costs. Would you try to coordinate and do it in one go? Director, on Type 2 or Category 2 buildings, the BD would carry out risk assessment based on the priority list, and we would consider the age of the building, for example, 30 years or 50 years, and the conditions of the building. For example, whether emergency works have been completed and were there complaints due to aging, or whether they have reached the statutory age specified by the BD. So now owners have to wait for your notice. So for owners of 3 new buildings who want you to carry out the default works, would this be possible? We would look at the priority of risks. We are willing to listen, but the risk is still the overriding factor. Any follow-up question? Mr. Y? The URA would carry out coordination. The OBB 2.0 might not take place at the same time as the fire services scheme by the FSD. In Annex B of the paper, we explain the other subsidy schemes or assistance schemes, and we would help owners identify the best schemes for themselves. These are new funds to benefit 3 new buildings. With OBB 2.0, and owners might find it very hard to carry out the tendering by themselves. Next, Dr. Chen Xiong-tai. Thank you. I have 3 questions. In the coming OBB 2.0, it will provide subsidies for owner-occupiers. So would you consider people other than elderly? For disabled persons or owners with physical handicaps, they have sought out assistance in many cases because they are unable to afford the cost for MBIS. Only 2 funds are available by NGOs. since you are promoting OBB 2.0, would you extend the program to people beyond the elderly? Secretary, please offer a quick answer. When we design the operation, both elderly and non-elderly people would benefit, but the elderly would benefit more. We don't want to overcomplicate the design, because for elderly people, we can use age as a threshold. But as we said, by 2020, we will review the entire scheme, and we are willing to look at the issue by then. They are receiving disability allowance, so they can show some proof. So you want DA recipients to be treated like elderly people, is that what you mean? We are talking about needy owners. They said it is hard to operate, but I hope the government can consider this. There are owners who require help. At this stage, we might not do that. In building rehabilitation programs, we use age as a threshold. For other needs, they can be satisfied with other schemes. The second question is on bid rigging. The MBIS policy has been in place for 5 years. Can you share any figures? The paper talked about 30 potential contraventions by contractors, and there were 11 convictions. Is there any breakdown of the cases of alleged bid rigging? Can you give us any concrete figures? I would delegate to the URA. Director, for the 30 cases mentioned in the paper, under the Buildings Ordinance and MBIS, those cases involve contravention of the Buildings Ordinance. So the 30 cases mentioned in the paper refer to mandatory WIS. They are mentioned together in the paper. So so were there any figures relating to bid rigging? The paper mentioned the regulation of service providers for MWIS and MBIS. Dr. Chang. According to the paper, this is those cases are irrelevant to OBB 1.0. Dr. Chang, do you support this project? I do not support it at this stage. Mr. Lam Chia-ting. Chairman. Building maintenance is an area of concern I have been following up for a long time. According to OBB 2.0, owners must take part in the smart tender scheme. First of all, the smart tender scheme is beneficial in terms of avoiding or preventing bid rigging, but bid rigging cannot be completely eliminated. There are two main loopholes in the scheme. First, no support is given in helping owners identify consultants. That's why the smart tender scheme must be expanded to include such support. In the past, consultants would receive thousands or tens of thousands, and nowadays they are getting hundreds of thousands or even millions. So you should think about this. The smart tender scheme does not include the supervision of engineering firms, of course, the APs are responsible for it. But if the URA can make spot checks or offer advice to owners on whether the works are completed properly, then that would be of great help to the owners. You talk about hiring clerks of works. They are especially, credible and reliable people are hard to hire. So can you offer more resources to the URA to carry out more works under the scheme to help owners? And secondly, can you also include housing estates of the middle class? Many of them are plagued by bid rigging. And for owners who take part in government programs or loans, they must take part in the Smart Tender program. Secretary, thank you very much for your concerns on building rehabilitation and bid rigging. One principle is that the responsibility for building rehabilitation or maintenance lies with the owner. Mr. Lam talked about owners from the middle class. Of course, there's a need for rehabilitation and they can take part in Smart Tender. But if the participation is made mandatory, we are providing a subsidy. I'm saying that the subsidy should cover a wider scope. I think this is about the use of public money. Public money is limited, and as I've explained, if we can only cover 500 buildings per year, our priority would be on older buildings and to owners with lesser financial means. So I think that that approach is not realistic. Are you going to expand the scope of the operation by mid-2018 and onwards? Well, by 2020, we will carry out a review. We will consider the events of members. Does the Democratic Party support this idea? I think I would see what the government says first. Dr. Fernando Chang, Chairman. Another 3 billion is injected into OBB 2.0. For older buildings with lesser value, this is necessary. However, bid rigging has been rampant, and now we have this Smart Tender scheme, which is helpful. And some people would agree that there is some kind of protection, but as Mr. Lam Shuk-ting said, the scope of protection can be expanded. Dr. Cheng Shung-tai talked about certain elderly concessions. They can be extended to PWDs. And there is now objective standard for disability allowance. As for the scope of coverage, Mr. Y said they would consider sharing the quotation or standard prices or standard works prices. Are you going to completely open up these data? The HA and URA have ample experience in building rehabilitation, so if the information is made public or transparent, owners corporation can make reference to standard prices. So are you going to publish these works costs? I think when the review comes, we will consider the issue you mentioned. And Mr. Y, I talked about a building rehabilitation platform, and the scope of the platform is wider than that of the smart tender scheme. Smart tender is only one of the tools of the platform. So apart from choosing contractors, we would use contractors to we would use the platform to monitor the works. As for the cost of works, we have published the data partially, as since there is no regulation, the data would not be very influential. So once we have standard terms and conditions, those would be of greater reference value. As to the choice of data to disclose, we are now working with the Competition Commission, because if we if we disclose them improperly, we might be in breach of the competition law.
Okay, I hope that the administration will at least give a range for reference. Then will you support submitting this proposal to PWSC? I have to consider further. Okay, next, Ms. Helena Wang. In principle, for OBB 2.0, it is to help old building owners to do repair works. And we agree to the principle and direction. But there are two things which are related to quality monitoring and management. And we're talking about 3 billion to help owners of buildings more than 50 years old. And you stated that there will be registered contractors and supervisors to supervise the work. But will more resources be given by the government to URA? Since there is smart tender and there are some references for prices, so you know which buildings will have to be worked on and which buildings have got the money. Can you conduct surprise checks of the works so that you will know whether they follow the tender document? For example, when Italian marble should be used, but in fact they use other materials. When it comes to waterworks, actually, WSD can send inspectors to check the work. So can you conduct surprise checks? At the end of the day, after the works are completed, you need to send people to check the work, at least on a sampling basis. So that means we need a way to differentiate which companies are more credible or of a high credibility. Perhaps there should be a scoring scheme. Then in the future, when you consider whether you want to grant money to works carried out by a certain company, then there will be some standards. If it is an unscrupulous company, then you won't grant any contract. Or if the company is very good, then you can, for example, rate it with a few stars. Then there are at least some bases for members of the public to refer to. And there is a criterion as to whether a certain contractor can be recommended. Secretary, at the beginning, the government will disperse the money as subvention or subsidy. As regards administrative expenses, URA will pay the bill first. After 1 year or so, we will review the whole arrangement. We'll see how we can work with URA in a better way in relation to resources. Concerning surprise checks, perhaps my colleague can take the question. Chairman, Mr. Y, thank you for giving me the time. I don't think the problem is with resources. URA can allocate resources for the time being. As regards supervision or inspection, 2.0 is based on the MBIS, and according to the law, the Buildings Department requires a registered inspector to see what needs to be repaired. After that, the registered inspector needs to be the supervisor himself. Otherwise, he will be held accountable. So there is statutory requirement already in this regard. And then about clerks of works. Now we are talking with the industry. There are two associations, one local, one overseas, which are willing to help members of the public to do a better repair work. But then they want the market to be better formalized or regularized so that the market will be more orderly. Can there be some name lists, as I said just now? One of the work under this platform is to work with the industry to compile a quality service provider name list, which will cover contractors and consultants. Oh, you have used up your time already, Ms. Wang. Next, Mr. Abraham Shack. Chairman, our party supports this item. However, I want to ask the Secretary. For OBB, well, how successful the last operation was? Did we learn from the last operation about any unsuccessful moves or attempts? Okay, this time this operation is 2.0. You're going to follow the path approach. Now, Carrie Lam is not Leung Chun-ying 2.0. Carrie Lam works in her own way. So last time, how many buildings were worked on? Every year, there are more buildings 50 years of age. So are we going to say that we want to work on 30-year-old buildings? You can extend the duration of the buildings, and in different ages, the materials to be used will be different. The government is spending public funds. So can labor be imported? We don't have enough labor because labor is expensive. How are you going to monitor the works? All these details are unknown. You just said which organization will do the work. So, is the last operation successful? If so, how successful? If not, why not? Okay, Secretary, thank you, Mr. Shack, for the question. For OBB 1.0, it has served its objective. 3,000 buildings have benefited. In this scheme, there are still two parts, as in the last one. The property owners can organize themselves, and for the 3 new buildings which do not have the ability to organize the work, we will make things mandatory. Now, for OBB 1.0, there are a few objectives. 1, preserve property value. 2, beautify the environment. Now, we think that the first 2 points are no longer necessary. In OBB 2.0, we focus on building and public safety. Regarding OBB 1.0, there isn't any confirmed case of or substantiated case of bid rigging, but there are concerns about bid rigging. URA has introduced smart tender not for the purpose of OBB 2.0. There is electronic tendering platform. We think that they can effectively lower the risk of bid rigging. These are some positive points. Chairman, for OBB 1.0, how many buildings are in the original goal? How many buildings have not been covered? And is it true that they won't be covered in OBB 2.0 as well? Secretary, for OBB 1.0, there are different phases. Okay, Chairman. Can they give us a paper? Yes, they will do so. they owe many members some answers because we are talking about public funds. So, okay, for OBB 1.0, what is the original target and how successful was it? And last time, if some buildings were not worked on, will it still be a failure this time in OBB 2.0? So I want some more information about OBB 1.0. Okay, we are happy to provide member with a paper. Now, Mr. Shek talked about success or failure. Now, let's say if a property owner originally had enrolled, but at the end of the day he did not take part. But this doesn't mean that it is a failure. But we can set out our analysis in the paper. Mr. Yik, will Liberal Party support tabling this item to PWSC? No problem. Okay, Secretary, FDU, Liberal Party, and Mr. Shek's party will support. For the other colleagues, well, DAB has reservations. There's no objection so far. You need to give us more papers. Okay, we'll conclude this item. Then we'll move on to the next item. Implementation arrangements for the Hon CHU Hoi-dick New Development Area Project. LC paper CB1 817161808. 08 is from the administration, and there is a paper 06 from the Secretariat. Relevant papers are LC paper CB11422/1617-01. It is a letter from Stephen Ho, and then bracket 02 is the administration's response to Mr. Stephen Ho's letter dated 26th June. CB bracket 1332/17-18 bracket 01 is a submission from a deputation dated 2nd December 2017. Now, government officials are coming in. I will introduce them. Mr. Liu Chanshan from the Development Bureau, Ms. Ho Pui Ling, Mr. Chang Ka Lok from Lands Department, Ms. Li Chi Miu from Planning Department, Mr. Fang Sheng, Mr. Chong Man Kit from Lands Department, Ms. Chiu Lei Lei, and also from CDD, Mr. Chen Chi Ho, engineer. Okay. Why does the number start from 14? Oh, okay. So, 10 members want to speak. Well, according to the original schedule, we will discuss this item from 4 to 5 p.m. and many members are concerned about this item. A few months ago, this item could not be tabled to LegCo, and Mr. CHU Hoi-dick moved a motion on this item. He is not here. Oh, he is here, sorry. My eyes are rather blurry. So, I will let members discuss this motion as well. Perhaps later on we need to take a vote. Mr. Lau Kwok Fun and Mr. Leung Chi Chang have also moved motions, so they will be discussed as well. Now, there are 10 members who would like to speak. If each speaks for 3 minutes, well, we will have used up our time already. One more member just pressed the button. I don't think we can finish discussing this item today. And I do believe that the Bureau will have to do a lot of work to respond to members. So, okay, now, Mr. Michael Tin has also pressed the button just now. I don't know who else will join the queue. So many members will be speaking, and there are 2 temporary motions that need to be dealt with. Well, I can only extend the meeting by 15 minutes at most, and no more. Mr. Abraham Shek. It is not meaningful to extend for 15 minutes. Please listen to me. Please listen to me. Please let me continue. Well, if I stop discussion at 5, then perhaps we will then waste half an hour. I won't let the government answer questions. Please use up the 3-minute limit to speak, and then the government will provide written replies. I don't think that we can finish discussing this very complicated issue. So please just ask all your questions within your 3-minute limit, and then the government will provide written responses. Next time, well, the secretary, after listening to our colleagues, will see whether he has any new position. Then we will discuss this item again. 2 members have moved temporary motions. I want to deal with them. If the motions are carried, then the secretary will see how to handle the issues. So I don't think we can finish discussing this item within today. So let's make good use of the time. Today we started late and we spent a lot more time in the last item.
Members will have 3 minutes each. So if you could not complete within 3 minutes, please send in your questions in writing to the government, and I would not allow the administration to respond today. So please note down all the questions and offer a written response to members after the meeting. And I'm sure we will get to this issue again in the next meeting. Would you like to walk us through a presentation? I won't go through all the details because we have briefed LegCo about the Hon CHU Hoi-dick new development area many times. This is an important source of land in the medium to long term, and there will be 61,000 housing units and 150,000 employment opportunities. I would like to invite my team to talk about the affected households and brownfield operators and our proposed arrangement. Please be brief. Thank you. And I would like to talk about our special compensation and housing arrangements. And apart from the option of public rental unit, we would also develop a special rehousing estate via the housing society. It will be located in the HSK NDA. And there would be rental and sale flats. For rental units, the criteria would be less stringent for the affected households, and we also offer sales flats which does not require means tests, and we also propose a special ex-gratia cash allowance, or SEGCA, with a ceiling of $600,000 for affected households. As for households covered by the freezing survey and vacated by the government, we will offer a domestic removal allowance. For the NDA, we would adopt the enhanced conventional new town approach. So in a gist, the government will resume all private land planned for developments, and we will carry out site formation, and we will dispose of the private land in the market. We would also lay down stringent criteria, and eligible private landowners may make in situ land exchange applications. Out of 441 hectares of development land, about 60 hectares planned for private development could be for land exchange application, including 49 hectares of private land. So in terms of the planning criteria, they are listed in paragraph 11 and enclosure 2. We have made reference to Kutong North and Fanling North, and based on HSK NDA, there are certain criteria for in situ land exchange. First of all, the sites must be planned for private development already, and it would not compromise the planning development potential, and they must meet the implementation timetable. The land exchange applicant must also provide compensation comparable to the government's cash compensation package to current occupiers. If the site involves government land, which could be alienated or developed, exchange would basically not be allowed. So in the Hon CHU Hoi-dick NDA, we hope to use it as a pilot site. And we have commissioned studies on accommodating brownfield operations in multi-story buildings, and hopefully it will be completed in 2018. And about 24 hectares of land within the HSK NDA have been reserved for brownfield operations. We understand that some operations cannot be moved into MSBs, so we would not rule out the possibility of accommodating certain operations on suitable open sites. And in May, we briefed the Development Bureau on the arrangement for affected agricultural operations. And with the FC's approval, we can provide compensation for affected brownfield operators. And around 7 hectares of agricultural land will be affected. And we will arrange a special compensation or rehabilitation scheme at Lau Pao Shan or Park Nai. We have clusters of agricultural land for rehabilitation purposes. And in the middle of this year, we announced the outline development plan, and in 2024 there will be the first population intake, and by 2037 to 38 the full development of HSA NDA will be completed. Thank you. So more and more members have indicated they wish to speak, so I would read out the list. Some members would like to leave early, so do members agree, or would we end by 5:15? I will read out the names. K.A. Kwok, Lau Kok Fan, Alice Mack, Leung Chi Chang, Jeffrey Lam, Leung Chi Chang, Frankie Yik, Eddie Chu, Roy Kwong, Abraham Shak, Kenneth Lau, Fernando Chang, Michael Tian, Helena Wong, Regina Yip. How many do we have? 14. So we have a total of 14. So with 3 minutes each, that comes to more than 40 minutes. I'm afraid I might not have enough time to deal with the motions. So shall we wait for the next meeting? Or would how about 2 minutes each for the members, just for the questions? So let's deal with this next time. So I can only extend the meeting by 15 minutes. So I will be very strict with the time. K clock, 3 minutes. HSA NDA must go ahead because we don't have enough land. Compared with 1999, residential land was even less, but the amount of agricultural land has gone from 66 hectares to 119. So in other words, the NT small houses are even more important than the people living in subdivided units. And when the government calculates the public rental housing units, and they also included Tin Shui Wai, so that's why they achieved the public-private ratio of 60 to 40 when the real ratio is 51 to 90. And the population projection went from 27,000 to about 150,000, even including the existing developments and brownfield sites. That is equivalent to 2 or 3 times the working population at the Kwai Chung container terminal. So how did they come up with such population projection? As for the village environs and village type developments, everything is unclear compared with before. The allowed village type developments are more and more substantial, and I do not want to talk about a potential declaration of transfer of interest, but the sites originally planned for public housing are now being used for small houses. So is the government telling the public that they have to return the flavor or depths to the villages, and that is more important than the public housing developments? As for the land exchanges, the big landowners stand to benefit, but the non-indigenous villages are driven out. For the indigenous villages, they would not be asked to leave, and they enjoy more privileges. But for non-indigenous villages, well, just like the link read, all the benefits are going to the rural powers. So is this the government's plan? I do not wish the government to respond because we do not have enough time. I hope that when they come back next time, from 1999 to 2017, can they show the changes to the V zone and VE zone? This is very important because more and more sites are available for small house development. Mr. Edward Lau, thank you. Hon CHU is very similar to Northeast NT, and the in situ land exchange arrangement is also similar to NENT. And in NENT, the relevant area is 4,000 square meters, and there was public or private participation, but at Hon CHU, the area is extremely large. You are talking about hectares or 100,000 square feet or 10,000 square meters. So the area is much larger, or 2 or 3 times of NENT. So that would create impressions of illusion, and that only the big players can participate. For smaller sites such as 4,000 square meters, the smaller landlords can have a part to play. But now apparently they are being excluded, so your arrangement is not fair. So it should be reviewed, and that's my first question. Whether for NENT or Hon CHU, or even future developments by the government, the DAB asked the government to satisfy the rehouse and redevelop principle. You should offer income and asset exemptions and allow them to be rehoused based on a one-to-one basis. You ask people to leave their homes to facilitate other people. At the end of the day, they might go homeless. This is certainly unreasonable. So for the Development Bureau or Transport and Housing Bureau, unless you can offer non-means tested rehousing, the DAB cannot support the government's plans at NDAs, at NENT and Hon CHU. This is a very clear message to the government. If you want to develop, this is something you must do. And on the long run, the government should authorize the Development Bureau or empower them to develop housing in the new territories for rehousing purposes. Then that you won't have to. Then we don't have to involve the housing authority. So these two factors would decide whether the DAB would support the HSK project. Ms. Elsmack. Chairman, a new NDA can provide more public housing units, so of course we are supportive. But we must not forget the people already living there, whether they are indigenous or non-indigenous villages, and the potential impact on them. The government told us about the rehousing arrangements, and like the NENT, they asked the housing authority to come up with another residential or housing project. But these options are actually not helpful, and a number of problems remain. I agree with the chairman. We should not try to wrap up this item today because we have to talk about the rehousing arrangements.
After this meeting, after listening to us in relation to rehousing and relocation arrangements, please make arrangements again to help the residents, because right now you aren't able to help them. You often said that after the brownfield sites are relocated, then logistic industry can be developed. But then there are logistic operators working on those sites. And there are points about compensation, but then the logistic industry has not agreed to the plan. So the residents, the operators are not happy with the relocation and all the arrangements. They have not reached consensus yet. So please talk to the relevant parties. So now I think it is not necessary to do any provocation or differentiate between indigenous villages or not. It is not necessary to do that. There are impacts on indigenous residents. So no matter whether people are indigenous or not, impacts to them should be minimized. Next time when you come back, well, I'm most concerned about relocation and rehousing arrangement for existing residents. Now, the building cannot really be lived in. We have given you the information. Please consider all the cases and make appropriate arrangements for residents and the operators. For existing residents, one potential problem is, okay, the government has made new arrangements, but now you are asking people to leave, you are asking people to demolish. I think all these should stop. Next, Mr. Jeffrey Lam. Thank you, Chairman. The OCP is such that the development restrictions are too high, land resources are not effectively used, and it is not in line with TOD policy objective. So can the rules be relaxed so that there can be a critical mass? Besides, for the Hon CHU Hoi-dick core business district, its area is around 11 hectares. In the future, there will be offices, hotels, retail establishments, and so on. For the proposed traffic network, it only connects to D7. In the future, there may be traffic congestion. So can you see how you can make better arrangement? Concerning height limit, you haven't revised it. This is a large development. So, well, we do hope to see a landmark building. Can you relax the height restriction so that taller buildings can be built, so that there will be a landmark? It will be good for the whole district. Can you answer the questions? I won't let them answer. Please just ask all your questions. Okay. For the Hon CHU Hoi-dick core business district, it will be an economic and recreation hub for northeastern on northeastern New Territories, so people can see that from far away. So how are you going to relax the requirement or restrictions? Are you going to only do it for the business district and not the residential district? Can you transfer some of the plot ratio? I hope you will consider this. In the existing plan, I think some plots are too large. So can you draw the sites so that they are smaller, especially the area surrounding the station? We understand that in the future there will be footbridges connecting the shopping malls. There won't be problem about this. We hope you will consider. Okay, time is up. I don't want to exceed the time limit. Next, Mr. Leung Chi-chung. I have a few comments. Population in Hon CHU Hoi-dick will increase to 220,000. I am concerned about future traffic. After Tin Ying Road is abolished, then will there be even bigger population for Tin Shui Wai and Hon CHU Hoi-dick? Will population exceed 500,000? If there is only one trunk road, this is definitely not enough. So should there be a subway or tunnel in place of Tin Ying Road? Then for the new railway service, according to the railway development study, in Northwest NT, there will be one more railway line, and I think that it must be related to Hon CHU Hoi-dick. Have you think of setting aside some land? Otherwise, there won't be a station there. I have talked to Mr. Jeffrey Lam and Lau Kwok Fan. Actually, it is related to Northeast NT, but why don't you take reference from its area? For the core business district, it is rather disappointing. The small property owners won't be able to operate. Only the large property owners can survive. This will be criticized by people. And then regarding the brownfield sites, originally there was more than 100 hectares. Now only 40-odd hectares remain. So the area is very small. In the future, there will be a multi-story operation. I don't know whether this will be feasible. If there will be a swap of land in situ, then for existing operators and property owners, well, can they work on the sites? I think they need a clear plan. Are you going to discuss further with the industry and give them more information? Perhaps they can hire consultant to do study so that at the end of the day they can take part. Finally, the environment-friendly connection system. So, will autonomous vehicles replace the light rail system? Light rail is useless and it occupies too much space. So, will there be more environment-friendly traffic connections? Mr. Leung Chi-chung, you seconded Mr. Lau Kwok Fan's motion, and now Mr. CHU Hoi-dick is here. I want to tell members how I'm going to handle the motions. Today, okay, just now Mr. Jeremy Tam pressed the button, and I cannot extend the meeting for more than 15 minutes. On the 28th of January, the next meeting will be on the 23rd of January, and we'll have time. So at the next meeting, I will continue the discussion of this item at the next meeting. I will let colleagues speak, and we will then handle the 2 temporary motions. Perhaps that will take 30 minutes. Mr. Abraham Shack. Chairman, I want to say that your proposed arrangement is very good, but there are so many questions for them to examine and study. Is January a good timing? Well, we may not be able to resolve the problem in January. It's just that today I can't handle all the motions and let all members speak. So for colleagues who cannot speak today, well, it is not fair not to allow them to speak. So I hope that in the next meeting, in the next regular meeting, I will allow 20 to 30 minutes for colleagues to finish their questioning. And we'll see whether the 2 temporary motions are passed. Then after listening to all the comments, the Secretary will come back to report on the Hon CHU Hoi project. Thank you, Chairman. Your decision is very right. Okay. Leung Chi-chung and CHU Hoi-dick, next time at the beginning of the meeting, we will let colleagues speak according to this order. And then we'll discuss the 2 temporary motions. We'll vote. That will be the first agenda item for the next meeting. So please come at the beginning. I'm not saying that you don't usually attend meetings on time. I just want to remind you. Next, Mr. Yik Chi Ming. Okay, last time in our meeting, we talked about the 192 hectares of brownfield sites and how are they utilized. The government has appointed consultant to do studies, and you promised to talk to me as to which operators can use those sites. If they can be housed, then that's fine, but then is the remaining open space enough? If not, then perhaps there will be replacement sites. Based on this paper, it seems that your approach is backward. You said you will not rule out the possibility of offering appropriate sites, the possibility of offering appropriate sites. So this is really vague. I am concerned about this. Last time I said, I talked about future compensation, and you said 10 years from the date of registration. I talked to the former Director of Lands, and I said that this way of drawing a line is not fair. Okay, let's say if this space is not enough, then I will move, but still within Hon CHU Hoi-dick. But I've been there for 15 years. But then since I have moved 7 years after the first location was used, then I am no longer eligible. So how to deal with this? Then what about the secondary lessee? So you will give them money to build, but now you only register the user, you will only compensate the user. Then what about the sublessee? He has not a role there. I'm not suggesting a split of the compensation, but who will build the factory for them? I want to make sure that there is an arrangement for people to pursue compensation from the government. I find your planning rather odd. Right next to the railway station, 31A and 31B are zoned GIC, but it's right next to the station. Why isn't the space used for residential or commercial purpose? If you are thinking of education, then why can't it be moved northward? Other specified uses, enterprise or science park. Well, I think education purpose or education use should be moved upwards instead of occupying the core space. Next, Mr. CHU Hoi-dick. Mr. Yik, if you still have questions, you can put your questions in writing. Mr. Chu Hoi-dick. Thank you, Chairman. I have a few questions. First, now the government said that 150,000 jobs would be created. I hope the government can give more details. From 2024 to 2038, how many jobs can be created when? And there should be an overall industry study report. If you say that you can only guarantee a certain number of jobs with a certain GFA, well, you can do it now. For Tin Shui Wai and Tuen Mun, for Tin Shui Wai, only 10% of people are employed locally. In Tuen Mun, 22%. Many people would like to be employed within the same district. If you can do it now, then you can achieve the purpose now instead of 2030 odd.
If you can deliver, you should produce concrete study reports. I have been against in situ land exchange since the NENT. I don't think in situ land exchange is needed. The government should resume the land and sell it off. So after the NENT exercise, you are under pressure to do it again at Hon CHU. If you are to do it again, I hope you won't allow it to be solely private residential. And for in situ land exchange, you have to ask them to develop subsidized housing instead. For the site number 8 adjacent to Hong Fuk Estate, it's now planned for a large refuse station. So I think the 8,000 Hong Fuk Estate feel aggrieved because they were the first batch of residents, but now they have to endure a refuse station. The indigenous villages are surrounded by Zone 19B, so it's ridiculous to surround a village with 40 or 50-story buildings. So hopefully this can be looked at. For the non-indigenous villages evicted, up with the exception of rehousing arrangements like NENT, they should have the option to be rehoused within the same area. Next, Mr. Roy Kwong. I think I can allow 4 more members to speak. Roy Kwong, Abraham Shak, Ken Lau, and Dr. Fernando Chang. For the rest, Michael Tian, Helena Wong, Regina Yip, and Jeremy Tam, I would allow you to speak in the next meeting. Mr. Roy Kwong. We have plenty of questions indeed. I'd like to know what is meant by the enhanced conventional new town approach in paragraph 11, which was promulgated by C.Y. Leung. Has this approach changed since it was announced by C.Y. Leung? For the public-private housing mix at Hon CHU Hoi-dick, it's not 60 to 40. It's currently 51 to 49. So if the mix is 60 to 40, there would be an additional 10,000 public housing units. So what is the difficulty in this? The government talked about 60 hectares of residential A units. How many of them would be for public rental estate, and how many would be for the first home scheme or GFS? Carrie Lam said there's room for private-public collaboration. She only talked about the principles. I wonder whether this is related to the task force on land supply, on public-private partnership. If we do not know these figures, it's very hard to see whether your development can benefit those on the PRH waiting list. This is very important. if you can achieve a mix of 60 to 40 or even better, it would be ideal. The existing mix is 51 to 49. To the west of Hon CHU, there are brownfield sites in the revised ODP or OZP. They would be used for other purposes such as logistics or warehouses. For multi-story buildings and other uses, would there be brownfield operations? Would HSK be a pilot site, or would the brownfield sites be left untouched? So this is empirical. Are the brownfield operators aware of this blueprint? We need to know all these before we can continue our discussion. So the government should take note of these questions. And in terms of the housing arrangement and the Hon CHU station and the commuting time. Next, Mr. Rimshak. Mr. Rimshak, your time's up, Mr. Roy Kwong. For the rest, please continue by writing. Hon CHU is a good chance to develop medium to long-term housing for Hong Kong. The government is using a past approach in planning for tomorrow, and this is a failure. They want to incorporate everything in Hon CHU, which is impossible. The colonial government failed in Tin Shui Wai and Tuen Mun, and now you continue to fail. Local employment is impossible because this is not the UK or Singapore. You should understand our economic development. You talked about land resumption. I want to tell you that there is something known as the Basic Law, according to Article 105. While you should prepare yourselves for plenty of JRs. You did a good job at Northeast NT. As Dr. K. Kwok said, you are benefiting the big developers. So this is just chaos. I don't know how you dreamed up of such plans. How is this even possible? No owner can make it work. You make it sound like there are no problems, so where would the money come from? What is your budget? How can you resume so much land? Like Eddie Chu said, are you going to resume all the land? Even the Chinese Communist Party would not do that. You need to encourage participation to make Hon CHU a healthy development enjoyed by all. Everyone should benefit from the Hon CHU development. You incorporated so many different uses. This is a failure. You should give priority. You should house people properly and encourage employment. And you should help people on the PRH waiting list, and also involve private developers. That's the way to go. If you try to work on Hon CHU behind closed doors, it won't work. When I retire, I'm prepared to launch judicial reviews. Mr. Kenneth Lau. The government is sitting on hefty reserves. So their priority should be on people's livelihood. Land supply is the best way to ease the rising property prices. And since the birth of Hong Kong till 1962, we only had about 200,000 people in the new territories. Now we have close to 4 million. So we need to negotiate with indigenous villages. At the beginning, the government did not own any land. The unregistered land was allocated to the government. So if we are to develop the new territories, the government should explain to the public clearly, so that way you can avoid misunderstanding between indigenous and indigenous villages. And under that scenario, it's hard to develop anything. Apart from Hon CHU Hoi-dick, we have Yunnan South, Kutong North, Fanling North. We have so many NDAs. In order for them to be implemented smoothly, the government must explain what they can do and what they cannot do. Some people talk about the occupation of certain land by village-type developments, and that is thanks to the planning department. With the substantial V zones, it's hard to apply for small houses. Small houses must be built within VE environs or VE zones, and those zones have never been expanded. So the 1,000 small houses granted every year, the supply has not increased. So there's a need for the government to explain this. So the NDAs involve evictions and rehousing. The indigenous villages would be affected. As for non-indigenous villages, the government should make appropriate arrangements since they have hefty reserves. Dr. Fernando Chung is not here. So Dr. Fernando Chung, Michael Tian, Helena Wong, Regina Yip, and Jeremy Tam, they will speak first next time. And you can also submit written questions to the government if you wish. And after members have spoken in the next meeting, we will deal with the 2 motions moved without notice. So that's all for today. And we will meet again on the 23rd of January. Any other business? We have no AOB. The meeting is adjourned.